Welcome everyone to the final post-game lobby of the regular season. I am joined here by Stressed Officio, Verius, and myself to look ahead to look ahead to the EU LCS playoffs. I played myself there, and we are going to discuss some candidates for Summer MVP, which will be very, very exciting. And while we had a very interesting split, in my opinion, it was very close, but H2K and Fnatic are locked in for the semifinals with a first round bye, which leaves 2 spots in Paris up for grabs. I think it's important to repeat that once again, that we will for sure see both Fnatic and H2K in Paris, especially for SOAS. I can imagine that that is an important one. So let's dive into the discussion then. Let's start with the quarterfinals and how they have shaped up. Our very first one on Saturday will be the Unicorns of Love taking on Misfits. Now, Stress, to close out the last day of the regular season, Unicorns of Love just smacked around H2K. So what do you think about that quarterfinal?
I think the quarterfinal should be Unicorns' favored. Misfits haven't been looking great, but we're worried about what we heard in an interview at the end of today from Exile, where he says, we're just going to practice like it's a regular week. Yeah. It's a best of 5. Practice against what Misfits do.
It's just the only, the problem with Unicorns of Love. Now, I was wrong today in saying H2K would win.
Who was right, Deficio?
I actually will say 4 times this year I have predicted H2K to win. They've lost every single time, so maybe I should learn soon when they play Unicorns of Love. But the fact that, you know, as Xerxes is talking about how they play Vitality, they play really bad on the day, they lose 2-0. Then they play H2K 2 days later, they play really well, and they beat H2K out of nowhere. That inconsistency and that kind of coin flip is just what makes it so scary whenever Unicorns are playing, because you never really know which team shows up.
Let's look at this from another angle, though. We have a Unicorns of Love, right, that consistently has beaten a lot of the top teams this year in Europe, so can play to the level of those opponents, but drop those games. H2K, on the other hand, has been incredibly consistent, as another example of a top team, versus all the lower tier teams. They almost always 2-0 them, but they are not to be counted on when it comes to the top tier matchups against Fnatic, against G2, against the Unicorns of Love. What is more worrying? I'd like to be inclined to say that the Unicorns of Love have then a better approach to these important matches against top teams.
I think it's a very valid point, because one of the big things that you see from the H2K lineup is that they have a good understanding of how to play the game. They clearly know how to play macro, and their team fighting has been improving throughout the split. But for some reason, whenever they go up against teams of a higher skill cap or of a teams of an equal skill cap, then they just don't seem to be getting the same sort of early leads that they typically get. They don't seem to be playing the same sort of style that they usually do. And it does make me wonder what suddenly changes. Do they show too much respect? Do they not try to take some of the risks that they do against lesser teams? It just makes me wonder why why they haven't been able to take a single series off of any of the other top teams in Europe.
I mean, do you have a point?
I was going to say, it feels like game 1, their game plan is solid, and then either the enemy team figure it out or they lose track of it. They were successful in game 1 and then swap to something else. I don't know whether we want to stay on the Unicorns.
Let's stay on
Misfits.
the Unicorns. I just tried to pull it out.
We go to the HK later.
I think the problem Misfits have now is Unicorns have shown us a strategy against the Zac, and I think Xerxes should be able to play greedily against what Maxlaw normally does, because Maxlaw has this tendency to try and out-jungle the enemy jungler. So I think Xerxes will just go and farm for a while and then say, hey, I'm in team fights with Poppy. Good luck playing any engaged champion, and then Misfits will slow down again, like we have seen in the regular split.
I think there's some cool similarities between their supports when you look at Unicorns and Misfits and kind of their role on the team. I think both of them are actually the main engage in most of the situations, and both of them really benefit from these tanky engage metas. The Rakan being huge, obviously, for Hylissang as an example. We've seen Ignite time and time again as well. Also, when he is the man who is able to actually play in the front line and start fights, it really benefits Misfits. So I can't wait to see how both teams are approaching the pick and ban phase in terms of supports. Because I think in this last game here, the biggest mistake H2K made was giving Rakan over to Hylissang. It allowed the Rakan-Xayah combo. They had no answer to it. They got completely wrecked in that 2v2 lane. And that's the kind of thing Misfits, of course, should know, that maybe you need to have an answer for it, or you need to not give over this super good support over to Hylissang.
Yeah, some interesting individual matchups going on. I just want to get to predictions for that specific matchup in a second. The only thing I also still want to mention is, of course, the obvious power of Evil against his ex-team. And in the same vein, a very important matchup because Exile, even though he showed up now, I think, in his latest match against H2K, he hasn't been having as bad of a match as I think in the last couple of weeks specifically, maybe. Power of Evil has been a rock for that Misfits team and has been the big carry, right? If they did win and the big player to keep them into most games, I would say, that they've won this split. So I feel like that matchup might be very tilting. Verius, do you agree?
I think if Maxlaw can properly invest the time into mid lane, it could be a really good matchup in favor of Misfits. Because what we have seen, especially from this series, is that Xerxes hasn't put much time into trying to help Exile. He's much more focused on the bottom lane, or at the very least he was in this series in particular. So I think that you'll have this different jungle focus, and that could very much benefit the side of Misfits. I'm kind of worried about the top. Like, we talk a lot about, in particular, matchups, but also in terms of playstyle. The thing that worries me about Misfits is there's nothing defining about them. I've never thought of Misfits as a strong team fighting team or a strong 1-3-1 team, or they carry through their solo laners. Like, there's nothing distinct about them that would make them have an advantage over the Unicorns of Love, where Unicorns, they have a very classic style that they are very well known for. So I think, to me, that's one of the biggest disparities. But also, both these teams, their plan was to make it to Worlds this year. Yeah. Everyone expected Unicorns to make it. Misfits have a year-long plan, and one of them will not.
Martin, closing answer before we get the predictions.
I think Misfits in some of the games can definitely win the early game. The problem for them is, can they then close out the game in time? I think if you look at like the first game today with HK Unicorns of Love, if we get this similar kind of draft from Misfits, where they actually have some strong lanes, at least like 1 or 2 carries they can play around in the early game, and then actually good team fighting later. You saw like they sacrificed top with the Maokai, but then had actually the Cassiopeia in the mid lane and the Tristana bot lane. I think that kind of setup is good. They should be able to win some of the early games against Unicorns and see if they can actually use that to close out the game. And that might make the series closer than people expect. I'm definitely not looking at a 3-0.
Oh, no. I think of the two, this is the one that we're expecting to be the closest before we get to Splice versus G2. Stress, what is your prediction?
I think 3-1. It's very much in line where I think Misfits will have an edge. I'm a little disappointed. Sorry, no, 3-1 for Unicorns. I think Misfits will have an edge in one game. I don't have full confidence in Hansama, unfortunately. I just haven't seen it enough this split, whereas Samuks, we saw the last game against H2K. If you give him the chance, he'll carry.
A lot of explanation already, so just a prediction from you two.
I'm going 3-2 Unicorns.
3-2 Unicorns.
I'm going 3-1 Unicorns.
3-1 Unicorns. So 3 times for the Unicorns from our analysts. Let's take a look at the other quarterfinal. G2 versus Splice. I already said I think this might be one that we don't see as close. However, G2 obviously.
Yeah.
Recently, the last week, they didn't win over Fnatic in that big match that they both thought was important. They actually also lost on day 1. So I don't know. What are we thinking of G2 now? And with all those concerns, is the quarterfinal going to be the hurdle, Verius?
No. I think G2 performed way better in best of 5 when they can just prepare for a single opponent. I think that even though they didn't have a great series against Fnatic, they should have learned a lot from it. And I also think that Splice isn't the team that has the same sort of solo carry potential that a team like Fnatic did, which is what I think, all the level of coordination that Fnatic showed.
So you're saying Trashy isn't Broxa?
I do not think that Trashy is Broxa, but I also think that G2 just as a team are still figuring out some of their issues, and when it comes to best of 5 series, I have a lot of faith in this squad to properly prepare and execute.
Oh, I almost think this is kind of also like the mental element. I don't know who it was last bit who said on the desk or in the beginning, when G2 is always winning, there is this like, not a fear, but the expectation that they're always going to win even when they're behind in games. I feel some of that mystery has been lifted because of their kind of performance this split.
A little less pressure on them this split just because of the losses here and there. I think the opposite pressure is kind of on Splice. Their last 2 series against top teams that we expected them to be competitive in, H2K and Unicorns, they didn't show up at all in any of the games, really. Like, there was glimmers, but that's what really doesn't instill me confidence with this Splice lineup. Like, I would love to say I think they could take a game or 2, but I think G2 will prepare effectively for this series, and I think they'll take it 3-0. I know we're not at predictions yet.
No, that's perfectly fine.
I mean, it's always a little bit of like a caster buzzword thinking when we say, they will learn from their loss, you know, they will come back stronger. And we say this about like every team, but it is actually 100% true with G2 esports specifically, because they are very good at analyzing their own mistakes. And very often when they have bad weeks, they show up the next week. A few things have changed, not the whole thing, but like a few changes here and there, and they look better. So an example again being Dissolution that didn't work out for them. I don't think Perkz is randomly going to pull that out in game 1 against Splice. I think they might change their style up a little bit. The Galio mid didn't work either. So they learn a little bit.
That Lucian did keep happening though, so I don't know.
At this point,
for you, it's turning into a bit of a meme.
I mean, maybe it's coming in once or twice, but I'm just not assuming it's going to be like the first priority for these guys. And I think they just learned something from these losses that they will use to adapt. And it is so hard to actually predict Splice to win this because they will be a massive underdog in this series.
So you're calling it for G2 as well?
I'm calling for G2. I'm doing 3-1. I think Splice actually can at least challenge him in one game. I think,
the safe prediction.
Well, it is a safe one, but I think the late game G2 team fighting have actually looked pretty weak the last week at least. And I can see Splice in one of the games actually take the win there.
Various, do you have a different opinion about?
Nope, 3-0 for G2. I concur with the two gentlemen to my right.
3-0 for G2 as well, so very convincingly. That says you guys all agree, actually, that the Unicorns of Love and G2 will make it out. However, there's a couple of rules with the reseeding going into semi-final stress. Mind to explain?
Yes, so if we take a look at the groups once again, rather than the bracket, it's actually easier explained how it ends up going when you look at the groups themselves. So we have a reseeding after the quarterfinals based on which group the winning teams come from. So if a team from each group advances, let's pick, for instance, G2 Esports and Unicorns. Very simple scenario. We play across the groups. Fnatic play Unicorns, H2K play against G2. The other scenario is if two teams from the same group advance. I want to pick Unicorns and Splice for this example. Then H2K will play against Splice because they are the highest and lowest seeded team remaining. And then Unicorns will play Fnatic as expected. That is, of course, mirrored if the Group A teams win. Those are the only patterns to the scenario that can exist. And that's why we have the reseeding.
All right.
One group may end up being stronger than the other.
That made a total sense to me. So let's go back to the bracket to discuss our semifinals. As was predicted by our guys, Unicorns of Love will have a Fnatic matchup and H2K will be going up against G2. Just want to say any of these matchups are interesting, but damn, that looks very interesting. Let's start with Fnatic versus the Unicorns of Love. What a fabled matchup, if this is what you guys predict. So how would that go? Of course, it becomes more difficult to predict because we don't know what will happen or how these teams will play. But Various, I'll leave you the opening for this one.
It's easy to say that Fnatic are the expected winners. They've had one of the best regular season runs outside of NIP and Rocket Games. One of the best regular season runs since 2015. As a team, they look on point. Individually, all of them could be made arguments for MVP. Like, this team looks amazing. But my biggest concern is something that we were talking about earlier on the day, is you never quite know what UOL, in the event that UOL made it, or in the event that their other opposition, I believe, could vary. Misfits, I believe, or Splice. But in the event that it is UOL and we expect it to be a UOL versus Fnatic, then you just never know which UOL is going to show up on the day. And sometimes they have those, oh, we played really well, and sometimes they say, oh, we had a bad day. But I think that their ability to teamfight and their coordination themselves is something that can challenge Fnatic. I just think that individually right now, Fnatic has the slight edge, which is what puts them above a lot of the other teams in Europe right now.
We've always said that Unicorns of Love is kind of a very good clutch team, right, in these best-of-5 scenarios. I have a same kind of inkling with this Fnatic, though. I feel like we haven't seen it yet because Rift Rivals obviously was not good for them. But I'm super excited to see Fnatic in a best-of-5. Really.
Me too. I think that my only slight hesitation is we haven't convincingly seen Fnatic adapt inside a series all that well. We've seen them adapt when they got found out at Rift Rivals and changed their style completely. I think there's been a handful of games where teams have challenged them. I want to see a team prepare for Fnatic, come in and say, okay, let's take out these key picks, let's try and play against you. But it's an uphill battle every single time. It
is. I think actually that's one of the cool things about Fnatic is there's very few picks now where I go like, oh, this is a must ban. Like, this is like one of the champions they need, where the old style was like, oh, the Kennen or the Shen, you know, with some key targets you can always look for. Right now, I'm not really like, oh, you need to ban Kalista. You have to ban the Alistar. Like, they're actually very, very wide champion pools from a lot of different players, which is a big advantage, of course, for Fnatic. Before this week, though, I looked at the last few games they did play against some of the bottom teams, and I was getting a little bit concerned because there were some sloppiness. Like they would lose some early games. Suddenly, certain players would actually start falling very far behind in lanes. If it wasn't for the G2 2-0, to kind of to reconvince us, I would actually have gone into this playoffs not being 100% confident Fnatic will just make it all the way like easy to the final.
Because weren't we saying it was just because it was the end of the season?
I think so.
That's what I believe.
I think so.
Yeah, I think they went a little bit easier on practice. And
Yeah.
in the games, when I looked at some of their drafts, like they were trying new things. They were trying new champions. And I just think that they had lower expectations on some of their opposition who definitely stepped up in the last few weeks.
Makes sense to me. I don't know if you even want to predict this, because this is already a hypothesis, right? But does anyone, Fnatic versus UOL, if we just go down the path, who would win that if that was the case?
I still say Fnatic. That'll be a 5-game series.
5-game series,
UOL.
Fnatic. Gotta continue the exercise.
I think Fnatic would win, and I think they would actually win super convincingly. Could see a 3-0 for them, potentially 3-1, but I think actually Fnatic will destroy whoever they play of those three teams.
All right.
I agree with the sentiment of Fisher.
Sorry, you're always last, so you kind of have to,
Yeah.
I have to
I'll
agree.
start
I
with
do
you for
have
the
to
next
agree.
one.
I believe that Fnatic will 3-1 UOL and 3-0 the other two.
There we go. So a clear Fnatic in the final. And then I'll start with stress for H2K versus G2. So Vedi in the end can get the prediction as the first
okay.
one. So we don't have to do that again. So
Too much pressure on
H2K.
Vedi, though. Like,
So you guys said that G2 would win over Splice. That would put H2K up against G2 in this scenario. Yeah, am I?
I'm a lot less confident in H2K after watching their Unicorn series because I lost confidence in Odo and Nuclear.
But the only team they lose to is
I
the
know,
Unicorns,
I
but
know,
they
that's
might never
kryptonite.
meet them.
I know that, but then you look at G2, we've talked about how strong they are in best of fives. I feel a lack of confidence in a couple of members. Now, I think H2K will still look strong. I think they'll be prepared. I think they'll come into it. Again, I would say a 5-game series. It's going to be one of these playoffs for me that I think that is going to be super hype 5-game series, but G2, in my estimation, if they face H2K, will win.
Okay, they're going first. Yeah, so Vedi,
Sorry,
you can-
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. We do
But
need
do you
to.
agree?
We do need to go.
I do
continue,
agree. I
so.
think H2K are not looking their strongest, but I also don't think that there was like massive issues. I genuinely think that emotions and tilt kind of affected them in Game 3. Like individually, they were not performing as well as they could, and I do think that if G2 were to meet them, then G2 would win pretty convincingly.
There is only one person out of you three that I had expected to go against this opinion. Don't let me down, Martin. You still believe in H2K.
I definitely believe in H2K. I think H2K have shown better things than G2 esports during the regular season here. I think going head to head in terms of like if you just like compare players, I see a massive mismatch in the jungle, heavily in favor of H2K. So I think Favor and Perks dead even. I think what I'm expecting laning phase dead even as well. And the bot lanes, that might be the place where an advantage can happen for G2. But Nuclear and Che have done a very good job of at least going even. And that's where I think the jungle mismatch will kick in favor of H2K. So if it becomes the H2K G2 show, I'm going to go away from choking memes and say that H2K makes their first final.
The trust of this man has absolutely no limits when it comes to H2K.
What if Trick learns Poppy? So maybe
That'd
that's
be
all we need.
worse.
That's
That
all
would
we
be
need.
it.
All right, so just
I
to
can't
complete
predict that, you know.
complete the exercise real quick, if we would have to have a Fnatic G2 final, which is what you guys said, who will take that?
wow.
G2.
G2 takes that. The Kings will stay the
Ooh,
Kings.
Fnatic.
Wait,
Interesting,
hang on.
interesting.
I would go with Fnatic on that. But
Vedi needs a...
Let's
Yeah.
hear.
I believe that G2, again, I'm still very confident in their ability to play best of fives and their ability to learn and grow. That is, to me, the biggest strength that G2 have had for a very long time. And in best of ones, best of threes, they get surprised, they get upset. But in best of fives, where they are purely dedicated on performing against a single team and they know they have to perform in front of a live crowd, like I could see no greater joy than G2 of taking that away from Soaz in front of his home crowd, defeating him on that massive stage and securing another title.
That's a great point.
I
Paris.
only see G2 winning the split if Trick looks like in their MSI playoffs, and if Expect as well is able to play mainly some of these bruisers that turns into team fighting tanks and not the pure split pushers. If that happens, I can see G2 Esports take the whole thing.
But who takes the whole thing according to the Fisho?
I say Fnatic take the whole thing.
That's Fnatic. That's G2, Fnatic.
I agree on the Fnatic. I think top and 80 carry, as great as Sven is, I think Reckless is having the best split we've seen in so very long. And I think that's enough in a finals with Soaz in his hometown to actually give him the edge.
Now we'll talk a bit more about possible MVPs in just a bit. I do also want to touch quickly on the championship points because playoffs super important, but it's all for Worlds. They can prove crucial in securing a spot at Worlds. These championship points, this is what the teams have already, and this is the minimum points. What? I'm confused.
So this is what the teams have already accrued. So G2
okay,
have
got
90
it.
from Spring, and because they're in the quarterfinals, they've already accrued enough points to be a minimum of
Right,
110.
but whatever team, of course, wins the split doesn't need the points. So the second place team would then get 90 points, right? So that is
Yeah,
how
and
that goes.
the other important thing to add here is that these top 6 teams will all be in the gauntlet, whoever doesn't go through points and through first place, because the bottom 4 teams didn't even qualify for a single playoff. They got 0 points. So
They're making it very simple for us.
yeah,
TLDR.
Playoff teams will be able to qualify for Worlds, at least in the gauntlet.
Which is, and I don't want to jinx anything, but I have a really hype feeling when it comes to these playoffs overall in this race for Worlds, having all of these teams still being able to qualify for Worlds, having 2, maybe even 3 teams, if I listen to you guys, G2, Fnatic, possibly even H2K, to have a really serious chance of winning the whole thing. Obviously, everyone has a chance of winning the whole thing, but
just as a tidbit,
closer to each other.
I actually think Unicorns will perform better than H2K at Worlds just because of their
at
up and
Worlds.
down nature of
in best of ones, you mean?
Yeah, best of ones. But that's a separate
That's too
discussion.
far.
Yeah, let's not go.
We saw the
so-
3-3 at the Rift Rivals, where it was best of ones with the up and down, where whenever they played P1, they would just get destroyed in the early game. That was rough. So I do agree with the best of one scenario for Unicorns. It can be super spicy for them, but I feel like it can backfire just as well as it can
Completely
actually
agree.
work
Yep.
for them, which makes them very hard to kind of gamble on when it comes to World's group stage performance.
We could talk for hours about this, but we aren't. We do have one interesting thing we want to speak about because we've just finished an action-filled summer split, and a lot of players have left their mark on the EU LCS over the last 10 weeks, and we wanted to highlight some key carries in the running for the summer MVP. Now, I want to put a different twist on this. We can't go too long because we've been talking quite a bit. But before you guys give me your actual MVP vote, I also want to give you a team, and I want you to argue to me why anyone on that team is the MVP for their team, and maybe even for the entire thing. That might go against your actual MVP vote. So, Stress, can you talk to me about G2?
Sure. So for G2, I've been thinking about this a little bit. It's actually more difficult than normal to come up with an MVP for G2 and then very easy at the same time because I think G2, while underperforming, I find it difficult to give to the likes of Perk. So I'm picking Sven as the most consistent player.
On
I think
G2.
Sven on G2 has been the MVP because they've almost always been able to rely on him. The number of bad games he's had is very small this season long. Very low deaths per game, decent KDAs, generally ahead in lane. Yes, they draft towards a winning lane a lot of the time for Sven, but he's the kind of player that you want on a team where you can always say, okay, give it to this guy, he will be able to carry it. And that, if I had to pick one for G2, it would be Sven for the summer split.
When it comes to G2, is there anyone you guys would argue that deserves it more than Sven?
I think that in terms of a whole regular season performance, I would still give it to Sven. The only person I might be willing to also consider is Expect. I think that towards the second half of the split, he's been getting better and better and better and better. But in terms of entire regular season performance, Sven is definitely MVP.
Okay, we'll keep you guys in attention for
I want to
Stress's
say Perks.
actual MVP vote. Oh, another different opinion. Sorry,
Yeah.
didn't want to cut you off.
I think Perks is actually he's been underrated during the split quite a lot. Like, I agree that some of the games have not looked great, mainly some of the Lucian games where it's been an issue for him, but in almost every other game, I feel like he's actually been really good. Like, laning phase has been solid, teamfight impact has been very good for him. So I wouldn't necessarily put him above Sven straight away, but I definitely feel like he also actually had a split where he can be happy with the overall performance.
All right, so a lot of good or strong players there. Verius, for you, I'm going to give you the Unicorns of Love. Who on the Unicorns of Love would be the MVP for that team this
Would
split?
definitely be Samex for me. I feel like above and beyond, he has been the best player on the Unicorns of Love all split long. I feel like that even though the team has regularly gone to all 3 games, he has been the guy that has made those clutch game-changing plays that have allowed Unicorns of Love to get those wins. And I think that if he had not had the performance that he's had this split, Unicorns may not even be in playoffs right now.
But who makes sure that the fight goes in the right way so that Samex can kill everyone? Where's our MVP from the spring split for the Unicorns of Love? Is it Chachi?
Having a rough split on the whole.
Yeah.
Chachi's a great player. We see glimpses of it. I feel like there have been a lot of individual mistakes from all of the Unicorns. and that has undermined a lot of why I don't really see Chachi as the MVP this split.
All right, that was the Unicorns of Love. Finally, I'm going to let you talk about H2K. If anyone in H2K deserved the MVP for carrying their team, who would it be?
I have a few honorable mentions before I mention
The entire team.
the real one. The entire team, probably as well.
No problem.
I think Che is definitely one of the guys you can look at as a guy who could, you know, really challenge for this MVP spot because he's been so consistent throughout the whole thing and been actually a good playmaker. But the man I give it to is Febiven in the mid lane. I think it was very tough to pick the best performing mid laner in the EU LCS between like him and Perks and Caps and so on. But I felt like Febiven was the best because every single week he showed up. Like his numbers are crazy just in terms of like his overall, you know, his overall stats, like CS difference in lane is fantastic. Damage rating is great from him. Like I just feel like every single game HK have been able to rely on Febiven to do really well and never like fall behind against whoever he's facing. And I think that has made the team more consistent.
I mentioned this on the cast, and I'm more than happy to say it again. When I think of MVP, I always think of who can you always, when you think of a team and you think of their losses, when you think of a player who is never a reason for their losses. And Febiven, to me, has never been a part as to why H2K ever lost. He's been so consistent throughout the split and is so reliable that I think it's difficult to see why how you could put anyone above him in H2K.
Yeah, Febiven makes a strong case, I think, even for overall MVP, and this is what we're getting to now. I wonder if any of the teams you'd been given, if that corresponds with your actual MVP pick. You said Sven for G2. Who would be your actual MVP, or who was, because you did vote for it?
Yeah, I put my ballot in earlier this week. I voted for Reckless because I think he's had a great split, statistically and playstyle-wise. I think one of the key factors for me for why he's the most valuable player is he dictated the successful and then failed style with the Tristana, the Kennen, like early on in the split. Then they went back to the drawing board for Fnatic. It was found out, brings out the Sivir, dictates a lot of the pace on the Fnatic games now as well, and they're back to playing meta. And I think that versatility plus the success he's had this split is why I
Is the counter argument when it starts to fail, do you need it to fail a couple of times before you're willing to change? Obviously, in the atmosphere of a team, that could be something, but I don't think anyone will disagree with you. The huge amount of work Reckless has done for Fnatic this split. Is there anyone who doesn't have Reckless as his MVP vote?
All of HK. So I had like a lot of debates between, you know, Reckless and then Soas, who is actually my MVP. I think both of them are like literally right next to each other in terms of the MVP votings here. But the reason I picked Soas is I felt like from the get-go when this Fnatic style started, it was a lot about Reckless, but it was also a lot about Soas, specifically on like Shen and some of these like champions where he had some globals. And his synergy with Reckless was so key in creating the split push style. And he consistently managed to always be there for his AD carry and help out the team. And then when the meta shifted and he had to play more of the different carries, bruisers up in the top lane, he's done that as well. He adapted right into it. Great performances almost every single game from him, and often like very big moments. And the fact that Soas, a player who's been so up and down in his career, has actually been so consistently good, just stands out to me. And I think he gets my MVP because it's been such a great split where he has struggled maybe a year ago.
Just as a note, what is very impressive to me, I know that doesn't work necessarily into the voting of this MVP at this time, but those are two players, both Reckless and Soas, who've been through the thick of it, who've been through ups and downs, who've been to the world stage and back, who've done it all. And I think it's just personally very impressive that they still have it in them just to redefine styles and come up with entirely new things and do that. Just as impressive it is for rookies to step up and kill everyone. I think those are really nice storylines. You also had Reckless, I believe, Eddie?
Yes, I had, my three were Reckless, Febiven, and then Samix. Personally, I tried to avoid putting multiple members of the same team in the overall MVP because I always thought of it in the sense of if say Fnatic lost Reckless, would they still be the same level of Fnatic? And personally, I felt like that they wouldn't be. Even though Soaz is amazing, I still think that it's his synergy with Reckless that made the team so great, and I think he's a core part. Febiven, as we discussed earlier, how he has been so consistent throughout the split, and I just thought that it was worth mentioning Samix simply because I do think that not only has he challenged the idea of maybe he could even be a top 3, maybe top 2 AD carry, very debatable, I know, but I feel like that his performance is what kept Unicorns of Love within the top teams in Europe, and that's why I put him as one of my MVPs.
Very interesting stuff. Nice to hear you guys' opinions. Of course, that's not all what counts towards the MVP award for the split. For the final MVP award, it will be voted on by the casters, but also the teams, journalists, and broadcast partners. And we're also taking into account player of the series for a small percentage of that. So it is a combination of a lot of stuff. The fish show handles all that stuff.
It's been locked now.
It's
all
been locked.
The teams
Do you have the answer?
I mean, I know the answer.
Oh.
I'm not going to sit here and spoil
No,
it.
obviously not.
You know, during the next few weeks, we'll announce it. All the teams have voted. No troll votes. Just want to highlight that. Always a big debate. But
you're in charge of the counting the votes.
And you've talked a lot about H2K.
It's stats team is in charge of count the votes. I'm not allowed to get close to put, you know, Severin to the top or something.
I just want to make it clear that he is not totally alone in charge of
I am not totally
counting the votes. But whatever it will be, we'll see who will be out, or who will come out on top, rather, as the MVP will be announced during the finals in Paris. Well then, I think that's it for us. We'll just take a look at the schedule because come onwards. We'll be back here for the quarterfinals. That is next Saturday, starting with Misfits Gaming versus the Unicorns of Love. According to our analysts, Unicorns of Love will take that. But before that is also the promotion tournament. The first best of 5 series start on Thursday at 5 p.m. Central European Summer Time. And in all the playoff talk, we're forgetting the hype about the promotion tournament.
It's going to be super fun. We've got Schalke, Giants, and then, of course, NIP and MM, who have both been looking better.
They haven't locked in their choices yet?
Not yet. So because the season finished now, the teams actually have until tomorrow to lock it in. So we'll know shortly. But yeah, that's when.
So and MM is the higher seed?
Yes, MM are the higher seed because they beat NIP in the cross-group play. They get their choice of which challenger team they want to face.
All right. Well, that'll be good stuff. Anything to say about the promotion tournament?
NIP will win it.
NIP will win the whole thing. There will be a trophy, mate, especially for Nico de Pico, because we love to see him be so happy.
Will one of the challenger teams make it in stress?
If MM don't step up a little bit, yes. I think it's very close, though. I think it's NIP and then the other 3 teams, which if you had asked me that last week, I would have thought I was crazy saying that, but yeah.
Well, TLDR, we have some very interesting weeks coming up with the promotion tournament and the playoff. It'd be finger-licking good, but that was all from us for the 2017 regular season already. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we will see you guys next week as we continue down the road to Worlds. Until then, have a fantastic night.
We'll see who comes out on top in game number 1. Festival right now here, and there goes Joko looking for Wonder, looking for the rest of Spice and Cooks. No, he's not got enough shield. Oh, that's a lot of damage flashing forward. Kabi's got 1. Joko's days are numbered.
No! How do they land it?
This time, the barrel bop combo. Trashy's there on the back half.
The next one is yours.
Okay, thank you. I killed him.
Yeah, but triple kill
him. That's right.
Oh, wait.
Hold on a second. Oh, he can't do it. Syncux.
Max triple kill was maybe daddy earlier.
And that is going to be the end. Finally, the Nexus is bare. And after a 2-game series full of action, we can finally say GG!
And every time in 2017, they have defeated H2K. Let's see if they can do it one more time.
Oda Wamne wants to keep the fight going. Vizichachi wants it to stop. They want to kill Febby. They know they can take the fight if they get rid of the damage source, but he just will not die. Plants, it's not low enough. They're ignoring the Baron. Well coordinated by H2K. Finally going to drop. Vedius, this is an immaculate performance. H2K say confidently, this is not a team you can make mistakes against. This is not a team you can force sloppy fights against. We will punish you every time. This could be a big moment for the Unicorns of Love. No, Karma coming in to save the day. Looks like he can still grab it into the flat. The hit from Nuclear. What is this team play? Hey, that was unbelievable.
Nice. That was a really good guy.
Yanko's trying to run as well. Momentum in the favor of Unicorns of Love. Hillisang thrown back into the fight. Exile untouched. Unicorns of Love, a beautiful fight.
We have one more game though. It's fine.
Poppy keeping it up. Cell division has been used. Vizichachi is fearless as he pushes forward. He wants that kill onto Jay. Now pulled back. Yanko's is going to drop. The kitty cats are going in. Multiple members knocked out. Samix exhausted, but it's not going to be enough. Febivin trying to dish out the damage. He's moving in, but he's going to get taken down. Damage to the interruption. Febivin actually taking so much back in return, but he's still alive. Twin Fang healing him up. Their front line has lived longer.
I need help. Back. Oh, I'm alive.
closes one out. I will say it again. Superman has kryptonite. H2K have UOL. Undefeated.
Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
And they say I have a grim sense of humor.